Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Robert Jenrick thinks he will be able to deal with Reform UK as Tory leader. He says that he would take oxygen away from Nigel Farage. Now, in reality, Farage does that to himself by smoking like a chimney, but I don't think that's what Jenrick means. But it's also hard to know exactly what he does mean, because removing Farage's oxygen was absolutely a possibility when the Tories were in government, and I explained how they should have done it quite a long time ago, but it is too late now. They have no power to remove Farage's oxygen off publicity, only the power to call him out. Does Jenrick intend to do this? No. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, while I'm waiting to see if Tommy Robinson gets arrested today, let's take a little look at the other populists knocking around on the right wing. The Tory attempts to deal with Reform UK. So, I think it was last week, Jenrick was appealing to Tory members via GB News. He said that he would take oxygen away from Farage. That's how I will deal with him. I will take oxygen away. Now, taking this tiny little snippet of what he said in isolation before I add extra context, in theory would be a good move. Indeed, some time ago, I said that the Tories actually fed Reform UK the oxygen of publicity. Reform UK were nowhere in the polls. They didn't know what they were doing. They were at the same level as their previous incarnation, UKIP, dead and buried. It was the Tories who allowed them to grow into the Tory-eating monster they have become, and they did it in two ways. The first was by creating the conditions whereby Reform UK could latch on to some terrible national scandal, asylum in this case. They were pointing at the number of refugees arriving in the country without authorisation from the state, the small boat channel crossings. The Tories could have stopped this by establishing safe asylum routes. I say establishing, just not wrecking them in the first place, actually, because they already existed. And yes, this is not what a lot of the Tories like to do, but as a way of cutting off oxygen to Reform UK, would have worked. Then there were the hotels used to accommodate asylum seekers. This only happened because the Tories stopped processing applications, which meant the backlog built up to ridiculous proportions. That was their decision as well. And a decision that has cost the taxpayer a lot of money. So it didn't even make sense as a policy with conservative ideology in mind, because it cost more public money and it helped their rivals build a bandwagon. Then there was the Rwanda plan. It was a plan that was obviously going to fail to achieve its stated outcomes, and so was always going to allow Reform UK to say the Tories might talk a good game on asylum and immigration, but they can't do it. They don't have a credible plan to deal with what they were both calling illegal migration. All of these were Tory party policies, right? All of them, which didn't make sense and which allowed Reform UK to find a cause to champion that would not otherwise have existed, because they were struggling. They were, after the election, they were struggling. They were trying to go, oh, should we become anti-vaxxers? No, that's mad. Let's not do that. Oh, what do we do? Oh, we're going to be, They didn't know what to do. That is why they were lounging in around 1 or 2% in the polls. Second way the Tories allowed Reform UK to grow was mismanagement of media regulation enforcement. See, not only did their aforementioned policies on safe routes, asylum processing and an unworkable and illegal deportation plan mean that asylum would become newsworthy on a regular basis, and so give Reform UK ample opportunity to have their say on the news. But the Conservatives allowed the news to promote Reform UK. They didn't have to. GB News is the most obvious example. It's not the only one, but it's the most obvious. Now, obviously, we know the Tories aren't going to increase regulation on the news media. Most of it is owned by their friends and supporters, and they sort of think it works in their favour. But rules already exist, which GB News regularly flouted. No problem for the Tories if they were flouting it in their favour, but they weren't. They were so obviously the media wing of Reform UK that it was a constant source of disbelief to me, genuinely disbelief, because the Tories are normally quite ruthless about this sort of thing. So you think, well, why weren't they making Ofcom come down on them like a ton of bricks, for which they would have had widespread support? The Tories thought nothing of strong-arming independent bodies to do things to help them. So why not tell them to actually do their jobs in a non-corrupt way that would have also benefited the Tories? But all of these opportunities are gone now. They're all gone. Reform UK have already grown into a major political force. So the monster has already been created. The Tories can no longer influence either policy on asylum or Ofcom enforcement. Only Labour can do that now. And I'm pretty dismayed by the fact that Labour seem to be suggesting that the channel crossings could be happening for many years to come. It suggests that they're not taking the issue terribly seriously at all. But politically, maybe they can get away with it more easily than the Tories, because Reform take more Tory than Labour votes in the key battlegrounds. So although depriving Farage of oxygen sounds like a good idea, albeit very late, does Jenrick actually have a plan to do so? Because I don't see how he can. So then we'll go to his full quote. So he said, "Do you think we'd be in a better position with my policy crystal clear, taking the oxygen away from Nigel Farage, make it impossible for him to have any credible policy objection to what we stand for, or the alternative, which is totally opaque, saying, we'll think about it, we might leave the ECHR in a couple of years' time? I think that is a recipe for disaster." So breaking this down, first of all, Jenrick is trying to suggest that a clear statement that his government would leave the ECHR would remove the oxygen from Farage, who couldn't possibly object to the policy. This is the most ridiculously childish thing that Jenrick may have said yet. Farage has two incredibly easy and obvious lines of attack against this. The first, as I've said in previous videos, he will just say the Tories can't be trusted to do it. They only went half-heartedly with Brexit because most Tories didn't really want it at all, so they messed it up. He'll say the Tories will mess it up as well, assuming they even go through with it, citing the fact that there was a very real risk that the Tories might not have even gone through with any form of Brexit for a while. It's so incredibly easy. You don't object to the policy. You call into question whether the Tories would actually do it, and if they did, whether they do it right. It's really baffling, actually, because Brexit has gone so badly wrong, and you would think Farage looks like a right tit now, but he doesn't, because he just gets to say that's because the Tories didn't really believe in it, so they didn't do it properly. They've messed it up with their half-assed approach, and he'll do the same here. The second easy line of attack will be to press Jenrick on how exactly he would use exit from the ECHR to achieve the various aims of the exercise, which would be an absolute minefield for Jenrick. Because first of all, he'd then have to get bogged down into the details of policies. And every time he does so, a whole heap of people, even on his own side, will come up and say how that's a load of bollocks, because the whole thing is bollocks. And Farage will end up taking these apart mercilessly, because something populists never do, by the way. You never get bogged down in the details, because when you do, you end up exposing the trade-offs. For example, everyone knows that the ECHR was not a barrier to the Rwanda plan. It was our own Supreme Court citing domestic as well as other laws that did that. Farage would keep pressing Jenrick for more and more details. And this little back and forth between the two, which would of course take place in news media articles, would end up with other commentators and journalists jumping on it. And you end up with the opposite of taking oxygen away. You end up making this whole debate something that gets blown up in the media, and more of the public reading what Nigel Farage has to say about dealing with asylum and immigration. It's absolutely mind-blowing. You actually give him more oxygen. This idea of Jenrick's is just the dumbest thing. It's actually a very Tory idea in many ways, in that it will achieve the precise opposite of its objective. What Jenrick is claiming is that if his major policy aligns with Reform UK, then Nigel Farage will say, fair enough, old chap, you do that, then there's no need for me to carry on making money by talking politics. In reality, what's happening here is that Farage is the one setting the stall, and it's Robert Jenrick who is the one who is going along with it, in the belief that if he exactly mirrors Farage's policies, Farage will become irrelevant to voters. In reality, Jenrick would make the Tories irrelevant. He said that the new leader needed to win back the Conservatives with a small c, but his policies and rhetoric it's like they're designed to chase even more of them away. It's not like any part of his pitch even appeals to them. I'd almost say it's a shame the party members don't look like electing him, because it might have been illuminating to see just how terrible a strategy this would be. That being said, maybe the party will vote for him. And even if they don't, although Badenoch is not interested in pursuing a policy of leaving the ECHR, I'm not convinced she's going to pursue a policy of challenging Farage on his policies either. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.